right, here we are. This is the solo edition, the preview edition of the Sundaypuncher podcast. It's just me here, no Simon, no Jason, and certainly no Dean. And this podcast is mostly to do previews, but this week, coming up, there's not too much to talk about with the previews. I believe that there's a lot of fights that, sure, they're going on, but at the same time, they're fights that don't really move the needle too much. But before we start going into the fights, there's a few things I wanted to go over. And I wanted to start with the first thing. Now, this was prompted, you must have seen that the WBA, they declared the winner of a fight that featured two guys coming off of losses. They declared the winner of that fight their super champion. Now, by their definition, the super champion is reserved for usually somebody who's like a lineal champion, somebody who's beaten the number 2 guy, 1 versus 2, the winner of that fight. That WBA super title is reserved for the guy who unifies world titles. Guys like Danny Garcia, Andre Ward, Guillermo Rigondeaux. These are the kind of guys, Floyd Mayweather, Vladimir Klitschko. These are the kind of guys that have held the WBA super version of their title, and that's not to be confused with their regular title or their interim title or their whatever the hell else they want to call it title. These are the titles that mean something, and that's all off of how they set it up. But this week, they've declared the super champion to be the guy who won the fight, the winner of a fight between two guys who were both coming off of losses. I don't know what they were thinking. Neither guy's deserving. Neither guy deserves to have a title. You should not be getting a world title fight if you're coming off of a loss. That's just how you think that things would work, right? Well, not for the WBA. And let's not even get started on the IBF. The Kameda promotional company, which is really just called a gym in Japan, but the Kamedas, Daiki, Koki, Tomoki, none of them can fight in Japan, and that's because of the IBF. We've gone over this before in the past, but the IBF allowed one of the Kamedas to hold on to their title after losing a fight, simply because their opponent came in overweight. This is the same IBF that Lamont Peterson tested positive for a banned substance, and they allowed him to keep his title simply because he won the fight. So, win the fight, that's fine. Fail a test, not okay. Oh, wait, this is the IBF, right? So it's fail a test, that's okay. Who cares? And that's just some of the things. The IBF has gotten caught taking bribes, taking money so that they can rank guys higher, giving out title belts to any Eddie Hearn fighter that seems to need one. And the same goes for the WBO. You guys aren't innocent either. The WBO has, stripped Floyd Mayweather and put it up between Tim Bradley and Brandon Rios, which, while a good fight, it featured two big names. Neither guy had done anything to have that fight be for a world title. But that's how the WBO operates, and you can just, in the WBC, let's go to them. Stripped Sergio Martinez famously, and then gave it to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. They have a tendency of putting up their titles when Mexican fighters are involved. And the thing is, these are sanctioning bodies, right? They exist to give out titles, but what they really exist for is to make money, because they're businesses. They're for-profit businesses, and they don't care about the integrity of what they're doing. It's simply to get that cut, and they may have their eye on the betterment of boxing, but where's the real eye at? And the real focus is on making money. That's why they have rules in place where it's like, we will strip you if you don't fight in however much time. If you're the WBO, that's an arbitrary number. It's not really something that's they are unwilling to negotiate. Just ask Guillermo Rigondeaux, who's been stripped for not fighting in the past 9 months. Meanwhile, the WBO has allowed guys to hang on to their title for a year, maybe even longer at times. It's really up to them. So what are we going to do? I mean, would you listening at home, most of us wouldn't work for a company that operated this way. This is just no way to live. And you wouldn't want to do business with them. So what we're going to do here on this podcast is we are going to throw out the sanctioning bodies. We're not going to recognize them anymore. When I do the previews, I'm not going to tell you if they're fighting for a title, because guess what? They're all meaningless. What's the biggest complaint that casual fans have, or people who want to get into boxing? It's that boxing is hard to follow because there's so many title belts. Well, guess what? We're not gonna play the game anymore. It's nice that you hold the title, but that really is going to be a certificate of you're the best of the 10 guys, really, of the 10 guys that are ranked by other organizations that your organization doesn't rank, because for a lot of the organizations, they won't rank a guy if they are rated in another by another body. So the WBC will rate someone like Konstantin Ponomarev, who's a Russian prospect with top rank, and because he's in the WBC top 10, the IBF won't include him. So they'll have someone like Ray Robinson, the new Ray Robinson. So you have basically a top 40 fighters that are all ranked in the top 10. And it's why you can have fights like the Deontay Wilder fight with Johan Duhaupas, who was rated in the top 10 by somebody. And same with Eric Gomez, or was it Eric Molina? I can't remember his name. He was also ranked in the top 10. But when you have 4 separate bodies who have their own lists, anybody could be rated in the top 10. If you ask the WBA or the IBF, you don't even have to be alive, because they've rated guys who've been dead. Ali Ramey stood on the list far too long after he passed this year. And, it just seems like there's negligence there. Like, they don't have their full attention on boxing. Well, Sundaypuncher, we have our full attention on boxing. Like, we don't have any interest in making money. You see, we don't have ads on our sites. We don't have advertisements on this podcast. We joke that we're sponsored by things, but we're really not. Although I would like to give a shout out to Rainham Steel, who sponsored this episode of the podcast. We don't do that because boxing's our priority. So we're not recognizing any of these titles anymore, and we're going to make things easy for you. We're going to give out our own titles, consistent with the lineal titles, because you got to start there. I think those are the titles that actually do mean something. Now, tracing the lineage and stuff is a little nerdy, but yeah, it has some logic. You can follow the logic there. But we're going to give out our own titles. And it just doesn't make any sense to have 4 bodies that all have their own champion, and most of them are a little hesitant for unifications. Little hesitant for their guys to not be out of the ring, and it's all to make money. We're not going to do that. So now, without further ado, let's reveal the Sundaypuncher champions, and they all make sense. It's basically the number 1 guy in every division, and we had some trouble coming up with this list because there are a few divisions where it's a little interesting, just given the landscape of that division. So let's start at minimum weight, and I'll keep this short because I'm sure not all of you guys have a full grasp of the minimum weight division, but we felt that the minimum weight champion, the number 1 guy at the division, and really it's not that they're the champion, it's just this is the number 1 guy right now. It's Juan Hangman Yathin. And we do reserve the right to strip guys, not because they're for any reason other than some guys may lose what makes them a champion or what makes them the number 1 guy in their division, whether that be out of the ring or poor performances, or suppose Manny Yathin fights someone like Butler and Butler loses on the cards, yet we know in our hearts that Manny Yathin was dominated. Well, I know what the result will say if you look at BoxRec, but we're not going to play by those rules. If Butler comes out the better man, he's the champion there. And this could all backfire on us. Maybe. I think we're onto something here. So the minimum weight champion, Juan Hangman Yathin of Thailand. The light flyweight champion, it's no mistake if you've watched him fight or just looked at his resume, but it's Donnie Nietes. And if you've listened to our podcast, you know that we're really high on Donnie Nietes here. Flyweight, Roman Gonzalez. Enough said, right? We don't even need to go HBO on you. You know, you've learned enough about Roman Gonzalez to know that he's number 1. Super flyweight Naoya Inoue, and he gets the champion, even though Carlos Cuadras has fought at the world level and at a title level longer than Inoue. Cuadras does not have that signature win that Inoue has. Inoue destroyed the long reigning champion of the division and rightfully inherits the crown here. Bantamweight Shinsuke Yamanaka. Now I know. Anselmo Moreno gave him a real tough fight. And this is the first tough one we came up with but was Moreno that dominant that we knew that Yamanaka lost? Absolutely not. That was a close fight. You want to make the case for Yamanaka, I'm all ears. And it's not crazy to me if you want to make a case for Yamanaka. And if you want to make a case for Moreno, that's fine with me. But Yamanaka did do enough to at least hold on to his position, although it was real close. Super bantamweight, Guillermo Rigondeaux. Now, he's been out of action for, wait a second, let's put this in perspective. He's only been out of action for 10 months, yet everybody wants to strip him. He's still been active within the past year, which is usually the rule of thumb for all bodies, except for when they don't want to follow them. And he's trying desperately to get back in the ring. Last time we saw him, he got dropped, and he was dominant, and he stopped his guy. Featherweight. This is the first real challenge that we came up with in declaring our featherweight champion. So basically, we went back and forth between Vasily Lomachenko and Lee Selby. And we took Lee Selby because it would make Simon mad. No. It was that Lomachenko has beaten Gary Russell Jr. Fair enough. And he's gotten 6 total fights now. But Lee Selby has beaten Evgeny Gradovich, who was a champion at the time. It wasn't for a vacant title. Gradovich had done what he had to do and then won some impressive fights at an above average, above domestic level type of opponent. So we're going to give it to Selby. I actually don't think Selby holds on to this very long, but we'll see. And the reason why Nicholas Walters didn't get it is because, as predicted, he just announced today officially that he's going to be fighting at 130. Featherweight's interesting because there's also Leo Santa Cruz who's coming up, and he's a tough fight for both Selby and Lomachenko. His activity is something that neither guy will have seen to this point. Super featherweight, Takashi Uchiyama. No questions there. Lightweight, this is another tough one. We looked at the landscape. There was quite a few guys who could make an argument for, but we felt the best one who had the strongest case was Jorge Linares. Super lightweight. Now, it should be Terrence Crawford, right? No. We're going to go with Victor Postol. I think if we look at who's the most talented guy in the division, obviously it's Terrence Crawford, but the super lightweight champion, the one who's done the most, who's had the better wins, it's clearly Victor Postol. The welterweight, we're going to go with, well, who else? Manny Pacquiao. I know that there was some discussion about having it be Kell Brook, having it be Timothy Bradley. Both guys have their claim, but Manny Pacquiao, he did lose to Floyd Mayweather, but he has beaten Timothy Bradley twice. Though the record books will say one time, it's twice. And a win over Timothy Bradley is a little more valuable than a win over Sean Porter at this point. Super welterweight is Erislan De Lara. No questions about that one right there. And we considered creating another weight class in between super welterweight and middleweight, which is the division that Canelo and Cotto fight at, but we couldn't nail down the division, what weight it would be at. But just know that the winner of Canelo versus Cotto will be the champion at their respective division, whatever weight they decide on. Middleweight is Gennady Golovkin. Super middleweight is Andre Ward. Light heavyweight is Adonis Stevenson. And those are, with Ward and Stevenson, they were lineal champions. If you have a lineal title, you were basically grandfathered in. And the middleweight division, obviously Gennady Golovkin, because who's on his level, except for Chris Eubank Jr., if you ask his father. I didn't want to say that too loud because I don't want Golovkin to hear that. Cruiserweight was the one we had. I think we might I don't know. I think featherweight was the one we had the most trouble with, but cruiserweight we had a lot of trouble with. And we're going with an interesting pick here. We're going to go with Pavel Glowatsky because he beat Marco Huck. Huck's already beat Lebedev. And Lebedev, I think, would be number 2. Grigory Drazad is talented, but hasn't beat anybody except for Masternak, who's he beat. So we're going to give it to Glowatsky, and we hope he doesn't let us down. And then heavyweight is obviously Vladimir Klitschko. These will be posted on the website. These are our titles. These are the only champions we're going to recognize on our website. And look, it's easier that way. And if you follow boxing closely, none of this is a surprise to you. These are pretty much the agreed upon number 1 guys in each division. And if you don't follow boxing that much, you no longer have to worry about keeping up with who holds what title. You now have to worry about who's the best in each division. And that's what it's about, is deciding who the best is in each division. When Top Rank and PBC want to make their split official, then we can create the Top Rank title, and then we can create the PBC titles. That's a joke. We're not going to do that. Now let's see. Let's go on to the previews for next week. And as I said earlier, not too much happening. So Tuesday, November 10th, which is also my birthday. I wish there was some better boxing on. A couple of years ago, we got Adrien Broner versus Anselmo Moreno on my birthday, and I thought that would be an exciting fight, and it really wasn't. It was actually surprising to see Adrien Broner outbox Anselmo Moreno. Another time on my birthday, we got the Vanes Martirosyan versus Erzlan Lara fight, which I thank the Lord for, because that was one of my favorite fights I've ever seen. Actually, no, I wasn't. I was really disappointed because they had this little party for me, and I just ignored everybody to watch the fight, and I did make the wrong decision there because that fight was horrible. And the Mikey Garcia versus Jonathan Barros fight that was also on that card, I don't even remember. One interesting thing about that card was that Terrence Crawford, he was on that card. He was fighting his 19th pro fight. Interesting card. That was also the first time that Top Rank and Golden Boy had worked together in a long time. So that was an interesting gift that year. And this year we get a real thriller, Alejandro Gonzalez Jr. on Fox Sports 1 against TBA. His opponent, he had an opponent lined up, but he dropped out for unspecified reasons to me. So this is the guy that dropped Carl Frampton a couple of times. Not quite sure what to expect from him. He was tough. He gave it his all. He had a tremendous amount of heart that he put on display. Just did not have the talent to stack up with Carl Frampton. On the undercard, undefeated featherweight Miguel Flores puts his undefeated record on the line. He'll face Alfred Tete, maybe. Also on the undercard, not televised, but you may have heard this guy, Javier Francisco Maciel. He's an Argentine super welterweight fighter. He'll be fighting TBA. I'm sure that they do have an opponent for him that it just hasn't been updated. But Javier Maciel is a tough competitor. He's one of those, basically, he's a domestic journeyman. Oh, he's going to fight Norberto Gonzalez. He's a tough guy. I guess they've added Kareem Guerfi back onto the website, so maybe that's who Alejandro Gonzalez is going to fight after all. A French super bantamweight, Guerfi, but guess what? He's going to lose. Maciel is a good fighter. Great opponent for a young rising guy. He's actually a pretty tough guy to beat. His only losses, once he lost pretty early domestically in his career, and then the other losses were to Dmitry Pirog, and then a very, very, very close decision against Brian Rose. And when I say very close, there's a little wink going on there as well. Oh yeah, I just remember that Maciel beat up Jorge Melendez, a Puerto Rican kid, on the Cotto Martinez undercard. All right, so that's going to be the PBC card that's going to be on tomorrow night. And then Wednesday, we have Anthony Mundine, 47-6 with 27 knockouts. He's going to fight Charles Hatley. He's 25-1-1. 12-round super welterweight fight. Anthony Mundine is still kicking around, and he holds the distinction of being the first guy to ever stop Shane Mosley. Also on the undercard, Blake Caparello. He's still out there kicking around. So Friday night, this is probably the most high-profile card of the week, and it's a good one. I don't know why I have this special affinity for Edwin Rodriguez, but I do. I always make it a point to watch this guy's fights. I don't even think he's that good. I don't know why I do it. I like to watch him fight. And Rodriguez is good. You know, he doesn't get a lot of credit for being as good as he is. His one loss, which was a complete shutout at the hands of Andre Ward back in 2013. Since then, Rodriguez has looked really good. Now, he hasn't fought the greatest of opposition. So one interesting thing about Edwin Rodriguez, okay? Let's take away Derek Finley. That was a comeback fight that basically was a stay busy fight. Let's take away that fight. If you take away that fight, you would have to go back all the way to 2009 or 2010 to early 2010 to find a guy who had more than 3 losses that Edwin Rodriguez has faced. Let's just go down the list. Last opponent, Craig Baker, 16-0. Before that, Azia Agustama, 17-1. Andre Ward, 26-0. Dennis Grashev, 13-1-1. Ezekiel Moderna, 19-0. Jason Escalera, 13-0. Donovan George, 21-1-1. Will Rosinski, 10-0. Chris Trietti, 10-2. Aaron Pryor Jr., 15-2. Buddy James McGirt, 22-2. EBM King, 7-3. I mean, this guy's fought really good opposition. Not great, but the opposition has been good enough. And he's going to fight Michael Seals, another good opponent. He's 19-0 with 14 knockouts. He's American from Atlanta, Georgia. He's 33 years old. And then you look at his resume, and you see that he's really not beaten even a domestic level fighter. Most of these guys are local guys who, aren't too good. So Rodriguez should clearly win this fight and win it big. There's no reason for him not to. And on the undercard, and this one's going to be on Spike TV Friday night, is going to be Thomas Williams Jr. He's fighting Umberto Saving. I don't know how to say his name. But top dog, Thomas Williams. You might remember him as the guy who lost to Gabriel Campillo last year. That was on a Friday Night Fights card, I believe. The one that Andre Ward fought Vladimir Biosi. So yeah, that's going to be the card. Also on the untelevised undercard is Fernando Guerrero, who's Daniel Santos, and Fernando Guerrero is one of those guys that's always going to be around. He's a good opponent. He's tough. You don't beat him unless you are a very good fighter. So he'll be in action. Also that night from the D Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. On the CBS Sports Network, too. You can catch this. Zab Judah, he's back. 42-9 Zab Judah returns to the welterweight division against Juan Carlos Salgado. You may be wondering, not Zab Judah, but Juan Carlos Salgado. Why is that name familiar? Oh, wait. As it turns out, as I went to BoxRec to look him up, because I wanted to, I know he's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. I think he's lost 4 in a row. He's no longer listed here as fighting. So I'm not too sure. I mean, Zab Judah's last fight was canceled because he got into an altercation at the weigh-in. I have no clue what's going on now. So maybe Zab Judah fights, maybe he doesn't. Maybe CBS Sports Network was like, we're not going to show Zab Judah. I don't know. But I do know that in the United Kingdom, on Channel 5, Nick Blackwell will face Jack Arnfield. Now, Nick Blackwell is a middleweight, and he's got 3 losses already on his record. Fair enough, okay? You can easily tune out here. 3 losses, that's fine. Except he's the guy who knocked out John Ryder. He's a guy. He had a majority decision with Sergey Kamitsky as well. So Nick Blackwell, not great, but he's a good guy to watch. He's a good guy to watch. Yeah, his upset win over John Ryder was actually kind of funny too. So yeah, there's that fight, and then also on the undercard is going to be Andrew Selby, who's Lee Selby's brother. That's his second pro fight, and Andrew Selby was a top-notch amateur, so he's making his transition into the pros, and it should be a good fight for him. And then Hughie Fury is going to be on the undercard as well, and Hughie Fury is the cousin of Tyson Fury. Hughie Fury is just as good as Tyson, if not better. And if you remember, many of us thought that if Deontay Wilder would have taken that fight with Hughie Fury, who they offered the fight to, only it was like on 10 minutes notice, Hughie Fury probably would have won that fight. And then on Showtime that night, Frank Gallarza, 17-0 with 2 draws and 11 knockouts, will face undefeated Jarrett Hurd, who's 16-0 with 10 knockouts. This is going to be a a super welterweight fight. Frank Gallarza, he's fought a few times on ShowBox. He's okay. He's fought some decent opposition. He's knocked most of it out, including John Thompson. John Thompson got knocked out. Oh, wait, yeah, John Thompson. He's the guy that just got knocked out by Liam Smith. Yeah, that's right. So take that what you will with Gallarza, how good he is. He's still developing, except that he's 30. He just got a late start to boxing. He turned pro at 25, and they're still taking it slow with him. And it's why he's barely in his 18th pro fight, or actually this is going to be his 19th, 20th pro fight. He's fighting a guy like Jarrett Hurd. Jarrett Hurd's a legit prospect too. He's 25. And he's gradually increased his opposition, but he's tended to fight guys that aren't very experienced. I think there's a high probability of an upset here. I think Jarrett Hurd can pull it off. And then on the undercard is Bermane Stiverne. He makes his return to face Derek Rossi. Bermane Stiverne back in action after a pretty lengthy layoff. His last fight was the Deontay Wilder loss back in January. And I wonder if he'll use the same excuse that Brandon Rios did when he loses, of the layoff being too long. Or maybe it might just be that he didn't stay in shape. Well, it is heavyweight division, and it's not like Stiverne's known for staying in shape or being in shape in any way, shape, or form. And at 37, you got to wonder, how this layoff is going to work. Doesn't seem to affect the guys like the Mayweathers, the Carl Froch's, Bernard Hopkins, all these guys. But this is a heavyweight we're talking about. And that's it for the previews. That's really it for the previews this week. Not the most packed week of action featuring big names, but there's a lot of guys to look at, to keep your eye on, and to see how they develop. One of the things that we didn't talk about yesterday when we recorded the podcast, because I recorded this out of order this week, although you'll hear this podcast first. I actually recorded with Simon and Jason before that. I just wanted to put some spotlight on Keita Obara. So Obara fought on the NBC Sports Network PBC card, and it was a draw, and it was a majority draw. I think two judges had it a draw, and then one of them had it in favor of Obara. I had it in favor of Obara. I thought Obara clearly won the fight. Obara just had a strange style. He looked a little bit like Beibut Shumanov in an evolved version. Obara looked really comfortable, looked exciting. His defense was just bad enough that you could see he would get himself into a lot of fights but still win. But interesting the way that one played out. But Obara moved to 15-1-1 with 14 knockouts. And this was the first guy that he did knock out, though it seemed like Castillo might have been on the way out a couple of times in that fight. Now, some news. So there's some news that came out today that had to do with Floyd Mayweather and Adrien Broner. And basically, Mayweather goes on a rant about Adrien Broner and how Broner got the super title from the WBA. And basically, he it wasn't even that he buried Broner. It was more like he gave him a really stern talking to, saying that Broner's disloyal, and all of this stuff. Now, I'm just curious, is this going to set up a fight between Mayweather and Broner? Will this be how Mayweather gets win number 50? Is he beats up Adrien Broner for essentially saying bad things about Mayweather, the money team, and Al Heyman? Will Adrien Broner be cast off and blackballed from boxing, or at least from the PBC branded events after Mayweather beats up on him? Maybe. Only one could hope, can't we? Would that be a fight that Mayweather could earn a stoppage in? I mean, I know Maidana couldn't stop Broner, but Maidana's not as accurate as Floyd is. I think Floyd could easily fight tomorrow and pick Broner apart like nobody has in Broner's entire career. And then another fight that got announced is Tony Bellew is going to fight Mateusz Masternak, who I mentioned earlier, who Grigori Drazad beat. They're going to fight on the Anthony Joshua Dillian White undercard. So now here's the moment I've been waiting for all podcasts. It's the part where I get to talk about not boxing, and I get to talk about Ronda Rousey's fight coming up on Saturday. So I'm just curious. Although you can't really respond to me, I want to know how many boxing fans are actually interested in this fight. She's the biggest draw in MMA, and now she's actually become like a draw outside of MMA, because I think, I mean, I'm seeing her everywhere. She's everywhere. She's on ESPN. Everybody's talking about her. Now, I don't know how her pay-per-view does. It'd be interesting to see if it does better than the Golovkin pay-per-view, because I think they both got a similar draw, or they're both similar types of draws where you're drawn in for the expected result, which is a knockout in Golovkin's case, or in Rousey's case, it's going to be a quick tap out. Although she knocked out the last girl she fought. I don't remember her name. I'm a big fan of Ronda Rousey, though. Only because I think her fights don't have a lot of slow periods where I don't know what's going on. Because I think that's the problem with a lot of MMA fights as a boxing fan who doesn't know anything about MMA, is that she's I know what I'm getting. It's like armbar, throwing somebody, or knockout, and the knockouts are self-explanatory. All right, so I pulled it up, and her last fight was on the weekend of August 28th, I believe. No, it's August 1st. The one in Brazil, and she pulled in almost 900,000 buys. So obviously, just as we do with boxing, we got to take 15% of that away. So that's roughly 135,000 buys. So let's round it off. Let's say it was probably around 800,000 buys, which is really strong. I think if Cotto Canelo did that would be a success. Obviously, it's going to do higher. And I'm also biased because I'm a boxing fan and I don't know anything about UFC that much. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this fight. Holly Holm also, why we brought her up, she's a boxer. Holm was no chump as a boxer. It's not like she did boxing and then got out to go into the more lucrative MMA. No, Holm was a world champion. She held various different world titles. It should be an interesting one because Rousey has stated that she wants to box with her. You don't box with the boxer if you're the grappler. I think that's all nonsense. I think it's similar to when Mayweather would say, well, I'm going to trade with this guy. And it's like, yeah, you trade on your terms. And I think if Rousey's going to trade with her, it's going to be on her terms. Since we're on other sports, we should just briefly touch on the Lakers and the pitiful season that my hometown and my favorite team is doing or having. But D'Angelo Russell is developing nicely. I do think that there's a super high expectations of how he's going to develop, and it's you got to look for the little things. you got to look for the little things. It's not going to happen overnight. He's not going to become Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul tomorrow. And he sure as hell ain't becoming Steph Curry at any point this year. And he's running an offense. He's with a stubborn shooting guard and a couple of guys who are not hesitant to stand back and watch him have his learning process. But as a Laker fan, I can't be too down because it could be worse. The Lakers could be the Nets without draft picks until the next decade. All right, so thanks for listening to the preview version of the Sundaypuncher podcast. And I know we went on some other sports, but maybe this podcast can be a little less structured and a little less rigid than the other one. We have the champions. We have the Sundaypuncher Skype account where you can chat live with us, and then also make sure you subscribe to the calendar to make sure that you're up to date all the time with all the boxing that's coming up. Thank you for listening.